The levels of carbon dioxide in the ocean is increasing, which is making the acidity of the water rise, causing threat to many marine creatures including phytoplankton. In this short documentary, ocean acidification and the effect it has on both the ocean and phytoplankton will be discussed. There will also be a short interview with a marine biologist to help you form an opinion on whether the carbon dioxide levels keep rising. Will phytoplankton still be able to regulate the climate in high acidic ocean water? Phytoplankton are small marine plants that make their shells out of calcium carbonate. They play a large role in helping to regulate the Earth's climate as their shells are small reflective surfaces. 3 ways of how phytoplankton help regulate climate are their roles in the oceanic carbon cycle, regulating ocean temperatures, and regulating ocean surface temperatures. In the 1800s, industrialization occurred. This is the significant moment where carbon dioxide levels began to rise at a fast rate. Before this, the amount of CO2 was at constant level for many years. The increase has come from the burning of fossil fuels such as oil and coal. There is currently 30% more carbon present than a couple hundred years ago, and to make matters worse, the levels are predicted to double and possibly even triple just by the end of this century. Many people aren't aware of the large impact the increasing levels of CO2 has on the ocean. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the ocean has absorbed half of the carbon released from the burning of fossil fuels. The results of the absorption cannot be ignored as the effects it has on the ocean are not harmless. It results in ocean acidification, which is defined as the addition of CO2 in the ocean, resulting in a decrease of ocean water pH. As the acidity increases, it makes it more difficult for marine animals to make their shells, posing a threat to many organisms. Due to climate change and ocean acidification are both caused by the increasing levels of CO2 within the atmosphere, ocean acidification is beginning to be known as the other CO2 problem. The climate of the Earth is hugely impacted by the Earth's carbon cycle. This is due to the levels of heat trapping CO2 that gets exchanged in and out of the atmosphere and upper ocean. Phytoplankton use about 50 billion metric tons of carbon in just a year during photosynthesis. This helps balance the amount of carbon in the ocean. Their role in the biological carbon pump is also very important as they store CO2 deep in the ocean for a large amount of time. Approximately 15% of the carbon they intake settles on the ocean floor, and as the dead cells break down, carbon dioxide is released. However, a small amount of the dead cells that aren't recycled sit on the ocean floor and become part of the rocks on the seafloor. The CO2 in those cells will eventually re-enter the atmosphere after millions of years due to volcanic eruptions. For the time being, this helps the climate as it holds the CO2 and delays the release. Phytoplankton use calcium carbonate to make small plates that are between 5 and 100 millimeters that protect them. When large numbers of phytoplankton come together, they form what is known as an ocean bloom or milky ocean, which is so big and bright that it is even visible from space. This is possible because each of the plates acts as a small mirror and can reflect light. The ocean blooms are what cool down the ocean as they increase the ocean's albedo, which causes the ocean to absorb less sunlight, which in turn lowers the temperature. Phytoplankton produce marine gels that shrink and swell depending on the conditions around them. To produce these gels, phytoplankton use between 10 and 15% of the carbon in photosynthesis. When the ocean temperature rises, they make a sulfur compound called dimethyl sulfide, or DMS. This causes the gels to shrink and then become airborne. Only the smaller particles can become airborne, as others are too large. The small airborne particles act as cloud condensing nuclei, which causes clouds to form over the ocean and reduces the amount of sunlight exposed to the ocean, resulting in the cooling of the water temperature. This is a negative feedback system. There are two different forms of shells, one being made from aragonite and the other made from calcite. Marine creatures such as coral and pteropods make their shell from calcite, which is more soluble. Marine creatures such as phytoplankton make their shells from calcite. The solubility can be affected by the temperature and pressure of the ocean. Warm shallow water is supersaturated. This is where it is less likely for calcium carbonate to dissolve and where reefs form. Cold deep water is called undersaturated. This is where it is more likely for calcium carbonate to dissolve. In the ocean, there is something known as the saturation zone, or the carbon compensation depth. There is a certain point in the depth of the ocean where calcite dissolves. This is called the calcite compensation depth, or CCD. The aragonite compensation depth, or ACD, is at a shallower depth. This is where calcium carbonate will dissolve. The shell of the phytoplankton dissolve under the CCD, while coral dissolves under the ACD. There are shell-friendly zones where these marine creatures are safe and won't dissolve. However, due to human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels has increased the amount of CO2, which increases the amount the ocean absorbs. This has negatively affected the saturation zone, and it has moved between 50 and 200 meters upwards and has reduced the space of the shell-friendly zones. I have asked a marine biologist a few questions regarding the topic. They have asked to remain anonymous. I will read their answers for convenience. As the ocean acidity rises, it creates a huge threat not only for phytoplankton but other marine creatures too. If the saturation zone continues to rise, there will be no shell-friendly zone for them to live and make their shells. Scientists are unsure on if they can adapt or if they will just die as a result. If the acidity of the ocean stops rising and stops the saturation zone from moving upwards, I do, yes. However, we can't just sit around and wait to see what happens if it does rise. Phytoplankton are truly underrated in all they do for the earth and the climate. The question, can phytoplankton continue to regulate the climate, remains unanswered.